Right now, it's the heart of migration. You can probably hear all the birds here, especially the warblers. There's lots of warblers out today. But now that the leaves are on the trees, it's really hard to photograph them. It's hard to see them, even without trying to take pictures. Hey guys, it's Marlene. For the past couple of months, I've been shooting migrating birds with the Lumix G9 Mark II and my trusty 100 to 400 millimeter lens. But I've been doing things slightly differently now, and I'm going to tell you all about that in this video. But I've also been spending a lot of time in my garden this spring, getting it ready for planting. And I have to say that working in my garden brings me just as much joy as taking photos. Who knew? But back to my new birding techniques. First off, I've stopped using Topaz denoise software. Not for any particular reason than I just don't have time. I've started using the new Lightroom, so no longer Lightroom Classic. And in Lightroom, it's not as simple to access the plugins. I'd have to go back to Lightroom Classic to open up the file directly from Lightroom into Topaz. If I use Lightroom, what I end up having to do is having to open up the app and use the Topaz apps. And that takes too long. So I've done a few modifications to my shooting techniques so that I don't need Topaz denoise as much. Editing is my least favorite part of the photographic process. If my photos aren't close to perfect, if I can't get it right in the camera, chances are I'll delete it and come back another day to shoot that bird. Now, I know some of you love editing photos, especially raw files. Now, you probably know this about me, but I'm a happy-go-lucky JPEG shooter, at least when it comes to birding. Now, of course, landscapes, I typically would shoot raw files, but not all the time, I confess. My second major change is I'm using a slower shutter speed. Now, as a rule, my starting point is 1/1000th of a second, sometimes 1/2000th of a second. But that super fast shutter speed isn't necessary if a bird is sitting on a branch. So instead, I'm using around 1/400th of a second or so, maybe 1/250th, maybe 1/500th, but definitely not 1/1000th or 1/2000th. And the bonus of that, of course, is I can use lower ISO. And lower ISO means that I don't need to use Topaz denoise software. So out it goes. Of course, if they're moving, 1/400th of a second probably won't cut it, or if it's like windy and stuff. But if it's calm and the bird is sitting still, 1/400th of a second is fine. And I never have to worry about stabilization with the Lumix G9 Mark II or the 100 to 400 millimeter lens, because we have lots of stabilization in this kit. And the third thing I'm doing is I'm using autofocus single shot, so AFS, especially if a bird's on a branch. There's no reason to use autofocus continuous because I find I get a better hit rate. There's no reason to have continuous autofocus if the bird's just sitting there. Now, on the other hand, if I'm on a pond and I'm photographing a great blue heron and I think that heron is going to take off and fly, guess what? I'm going to pop it into autofocus continuous. Now, I'm still using animal body or animal eye detection for my focus. Now, if the bird is one of those that sits still for a long time, I can use a smaller focus area, which I also find is more accurate. But most often, I'm using the central zone, which I can nudge around with the joystick as needed. I also shoot a lot of small birds these days, and they're usually hidden in branches. So I've got my two front buttons on the G9 II set to AF on near and AF on far. That is super handy when you need to see through or in front of branches. And another thing about photographing birds, you probably know this already, but you need patience, especially for those flighty birds. Sometimes you're walking on a path and you see something move and it flies off, and then you walk a few more steps and it flies ahead of you again, and then you're thinking, like, this bird is just outrunning me. So what I tend to do is if I see something, I don't go ahead. I stop and I wait, and often it comes back. Uh-oh, guess whose battery died? Guilty. Luckily, I have a power bank with me. So why don't you have a spare battery, Marlene? Well, this isn't my camera, and until I buy this camera, I'm just going to use the battery that was given to me when I got the loaner. And wow, this thing saved my bacon today. I went from having a dead camera to, well, let me show you, like 3 little bars on the battery. I hope your bird migration season is going well for you, and I hope you get some awesome photos.